No questions on Chairman Powell. No questions on Chairman Powell at all. Talk to me about deglobalization. How compatible is deglobalization with the chip industry in its modern form?
Well, ever since we started this journey of bringing the U.S. chips and the EU Chips Act to place, it was all about building resilient supply chains. And we said for something so critical, and I ask all the time, what aspect of your life is not becoming more digital? Well, everything is, and everything digital runs on semiconductors. And through COVID, we saw the fragility of our supply chains. We're one port, one island, and because of that, we said we need a balanced supply chain for the world. And that's what we're off to do, is to rebuild the Americas and the European supply chain for semiconductors. So, hey, we're all better off, right? We have better jobs, we have better national security, better economic, and we're ready for a turbulent world. And with 2 wars active today, and different countries, and different political and geopolitical concerns, this is critical for the future.
Let's talk about the CHIPS Act. Can you just walk our audience through, particularly the audience outside of the United States, what that is, how big it is, and whether you've actually received anything from it yet?
Yeah, so the CHIPS Act, $52 billion. Some of that was capital offset, some of that was long-term R&D, and it was paralleled by the EU CHIPS Act, right, which was about 45 billion euros. So very similar constructs. And what it was saying, we never voted to get rid of this industry, this critical industry for the future, but Asian economies voted to get it. And as a result, we're no longer competitive in U.S. and in Europe. So let's create a leveling, and long-term incentives to invest in this industry. And that's what the CHIPS Act is doing. And, Commerce set up their department, DG Comp for the EU Commission is now underway, and we have projects in the U.S. and projects in Europe to take advantage of that. And they're in the latter stages, right? And as I say, boy, I'm ready. I'm building factories today. Let's go.
Can you quantify, though, to John's point, how much Intel is receiving from the CHIPS Act? Can you quantify how much cheaper it really would make manufacturing in the U.S. for you?
Well, what we said is, and, industry analysis like the Semiconductor Industry Association in the U.S., similar studies done by BCG and others have said it's 30 to 40% cheaper to build in Asia, right? Because of, taxes, tariffs, incentives, labor, the supply chains. And the CHIPS Act is designed to close that gap. So if you're building a $20 billion facility, you're 30 to 40% uncompetitive without some of these economic capabilities being put in place. And that's what the U.S. and European CHIPS Act are doing, bringing those so that when we make enormous, and these facilities, and the one we're doing in Germany, is well over 30 billion euros. This is huge. And I can't be uncompetitive to that degree and expect to compete in the world market effectively.
There's a question when you talk about supply chains of the foundry that you're building and who's going to be building their chips with you, right? It's not just about your chips anymore. Have you had any real conversations with the Amazons of the world, with the Apples of the world, with NVIDIA about manufacturing some of their chips?
Yeah, we've had lots of conversations with them, and we've started to close design wins with different ones. And for the most part, it's not the industry practice for them to say their name because they already have relationships with others in that regard, and they somewhat view it as competitive intelligence as well. But as we've announced, we now have 3 major foundry customers for our most advanced process technology. We've now announced multiple advanced packaging customers as well. And my earnings call is next week, and we'll be updating on both of those as we come up on the earnings call. So we're making good, solid progress for industry engagement. We have tens of chips, test chips as they're called, that'll be going into the factories in the next few months here from different potential customers as well. I'll say momentum is building for us to become that Western foundry for the world.
The political attention this industry has gotten over the last few years has been phenomenal. I remember when Rex Tillerson got the job at the State Department, coming off the back of his work at Exxon, and there was a view that he was the ultimate diplomat because he had to deal with governments all around the world. And I now think of people in your industry as the ultimate diplomats. Have you had to become a politician over the last few years?
Well, my day job is running Intel. And, with that, making sure we rebuild our process leadership, our product engineering, rebuilding our customer relationships. But I've had to spend a lot more time in Brussels and in the Capitol Hill, right, on these topics than I certainly would have envisioned, right, when I took the job. But it's been fulfilling as well, because I think we've created the two most significant pieces of industrial policy since World War II. We've accomplished that in the last couple of years, and I think fundamentally we are rebuilding the supply chains of the West. I'm proud of that.
Well, you talk about Europe, and you mentioned building in the U.S., and you threw Europe in, and I kept wondering, where's the European Chips Act, right? How much cheaper is it to develop in the U.S. now than the Europe? How much does the Europe lack that competitive edge that it might have had?
The gaps between U.S. and Asia and Europe and Asia are similar, right? And this 30 to 40% is sort of a good thumb in the air, for that competitiveness. And we're not trying to say it's U.S. versus Europe. It's U.S. and Europe to be competitive with Asia. Because if we were here in 1990, 80% was built in U.S. and Europe. Now it's 20%.
But Europe doesn't have a Chips Act, and so I'm wondering.
Oh, it does.
Okay,
the EU Chips Act.
Does it commensurate does it compensate
Absolutely.
you enough? Okay.
Absolutely. And we feel good with that, and our proposals for Poland and Germany, the two big projects that we've announced will soon be going through the DG Comp process. I just met with Commissioner Vestager last week, and we discussed those proposals coming forward from Germany, bringing it forward, and Poland bringing it forward. So, we're expecting those to come to fruition quickly and get the big, Magdeburg project underway and the big Wroclaw project underway. We're quite excited, and it builds on what we're doing already in Ireland, right, which is making good progress, and what we're already doing in Israel.